Sunday, September 28, 2025. AGNDD intelliReport topic. Mother Solomon, please pardon any visual and informational inaccuracies in this entirely AI-generated article-based video. Discover the inspiring story of Margaret Gray Eyes Solomon, a resilient Wyandotte woman who endured relocation, loss, and hardship in 19th century America. From Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. Margaret Gray Eyes Solomon, November 1816, August 18, 1890, better known as Mother Solomon, was a Wyandotte nanny and cultural activist. Solomon was born along Owl Creek in Marion County, Ohio, to a Wyandotte chief father. In 1822, her family moved to the Big Spring Reservation in Wyandotte County, where elders relayed oral tradition to her. She learned housekeeping and English at a mission school and began attending the Wyandotte Mission Church. Solomon married David Young, a Wyandotte man, in 1833 and had several children with him, some of whom died before 1843. That year, the Indian Removal Act forced the Wyandottes to move to Kansas. Illness and poor living conditions were initially widespread in the new community. Solomon had more children in Kansas, though by 1860 her husband and remaining children had died. Solomon became homesick after marrying the Wyandotte sheriff John Solomon in 1860. Alongside her nephew, the Solomons relocated to around Upper Sandusky, Ohio, in 1865. When John died in 1876, she began babysitting children, and her village nicknamed her Mother Solomon. Mother Solomon promoted Wyandotte culture and advocated for the restoration of the rundown Mission Church. During its rededication in 1889, she sang a Wyandotte translation of the hymn, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing," and impressed many attendees with her stage presence. Solomon died in 1890. She was a popular local figure, and her death was widely reported in newspapers. The Wyandotte County Museum has since displayed her belongings. Mother Solomon's early life and education. Margaret Gray Eyes Solomon was born in November 1816 along Owl Creek in Marion County, Ohio. She was the eldest of 4 full siblings and 2 half-siblings. Her father was the Wyandotte chief John Squire Gray Eyes, and her mother was a Wyandotte woman named Eliza. Solomon's given name was of Christian origin. Squire sought to teach indigenous knowledge to Solomon, and he encouraged family visits to culturally significant sites. For example, when Solomon was 4, Squire brought her to the Olentangy Indian Caverns. She learned that generations of Wyandottes held meetings or hid from enemies in the caves and understood the importance of visiting the site. Mothner Solomon and her family worked as hunters and traders along village footpaths. In 1822, they moved into a small cabin on the Big Spring Reservation, located north of Cary in Wyandotte County. Solomon recited traditional Wyandotte language teachings to her dolls at home, and Wyandotte elders relayed oral tradition to her. For example, her uncle, Chief Warpole, taught her the origin of their family name. Her part-British paternal grandfather was adopted into the Wyandottes and was named Gray Eyes Man. Another time, Solomon gathered with other children to hear Warpole describe the origins of the Wyandottes in Canada and their relocations to Michilimackinac, Detroit, and Upper Sandusky. He emphasized to his audience the importance of maintaining Wyandotte culture. Methodist missionaries were prominent in the reserve and converted many Wyandottes. Squire was among a group of chiefs that requested the Methodist Episcopal Church to build a mission school in Upper Sandusky. Upon its opening in 1821, Mother Solomon was one of the first students to be enrolled. Students boarded at the school, and her siblings later attended with her. Mother Solomon and the other schoolgirls were taught to weave, sew, knit, cook, and housekeep. The missionary Harriet Stubbs taught Solomon hymns, and at age 13 she was improving her English spelling and reading. As a child, Solomon also attended the nearby Wyandotte Mission Church. 2 of Mother Solomon's siblings married Wyandottes from the Detroit River area, and her family kept close relationships with the community there. Solomon married David Young, a Wyandotte man who had adopted a Christian name after becoming a Methodist preacher. Their wedding occurred in the Mission Church on February 4, 1833. Solomon and Young had at least 3 children in Ohio. Wyandotte removal to Kansas. President Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act, a major law in his project of Indian removal, was passed in 1830 and required indigenous communities to move west of the Mississippi River. Commissioners sent by the federal government to negotiate treaties began pressuring the Wyandottes to leave, and many nearby Lenapes and Shawnees moved west. However, Wyandotte scouting parties out west in 1831 and 1834 rejected the land tracts proposed by the government. Squire was against removing and only conceded when a Wyandotte council voted 2/3 in favor. The Wyandottes secured 25,000 acres, 10,000 ha, within Kansas City, Kansas, then reluctantly signed a removal treaty in March 1842. On July 12, 1843, Mother Solomon gathered alongside hundreds at the Wyandotte Mission Church. They grieved, spread flowers across the adjacent cemetery, and heard Squire give a farewell speech. Mrs. Parker, a white friend, cried and hugged Solomon before she left. At least one daughter traveled with Solomon and Young, though at least 2 of their children had died and were buried in the Mission Church cemetery. Solomon felt distraught leaving them behind. Around 664 Wyandottes arrived in Cincinnati, Ohio, after a week of travel by wagon, horse, and foot. Whiskey traders gathered and threatened them before they boarded 2 steamships to St. Louis, Missouri. They boarded 2 more steamships to Kansas City, but upon arrival, the federal government failed to provide the land described in the treaty. The Wyandottes were forced to camp in flooded lowlands along the Kansas River, where eye inflammation, measles, and severe diarrhea were widespread, and 100 of them died. In December, the Wyandottes secured 25,000 acres of land from neighboring Lenapes. In Kansas, Young began work as a ferryman while Mother Solomon recuperated from the removal with her family. The 2 settled in a small house built around December 1843, then ordered saplings and seeds from a nursery in Ohio. They began an apple tree orchard and a garden of corn, beans, and potatoes. Although the soil had not been plowed and the first summer was extremely hot, they continued to cultivate the garden. Mother Solomon had more children in Kansas. She is known to have had 3 boys and 5 girls throughout her life, though all of them died young. Her 2-year-old son died in 1848, and another son died of remittent fever a year later. She only had 3 living children by 1851. That year, Young died of tuberculosis, and in 1852, a daughter died of cholera. By the end of the decade, Solomon had buried her entire family in the Huron Indian Cemetery, which had replaced the mission school and church as a Wyandotte fixture. A gray horse, bay horse, and brown mare, worth $195 combined, were stolen from Mother Solomon in September 1848, which she attributed to emigrants traveling the Oregon Trail. That fall, further thefts occurred involving 30 of her pigs, worth $90 in total. Possessions totaling $580, including oxen and horses, were stolen from her between 1855 and 1859. In one case, a housekeeper named James Cook reportedly fled after stealing $225 worth of gold coins from a trunk owned by her brother. Solomon submitted an affidavit about the thefts to an Indian agent in 1861 in order to be compensated. Her friend Catherine Johnson corroborated each theft and stated that all were committed by white men. Federal commissioners approved some of her claims, worth $295 for compensation. Mother Solomon's return to Ohio. Margaret Solomon married the Wyandotte Sheriff John Solomon in 1860, and afterwards was struck by homesickness. She convinced John and her nephew, Jimmy Guyami, to return to Ohio with her. The 2-acre, 0.8 ha land tract she owned with John was put up for auction in October 1862. The 3 returned to Ohio in 1865 and settled in a small cabin she had previously lived in, located north of Upper Sandusky along the Sandusky River. According to the historian Catherine McGee LaBelle, there was little left of the old reservation. The community council house had burned down in 1851, and the roof and walls of the mission church had begun to collapse, although several grave sites and houses remained. John worked as a tailor until his death on December 14, 1876. Now 60 and widowed a second time, Solomon began babysitting children in her settler village, and she often helped struggling families. She worked tirelessly every day in her childcare, and the village nicknamed her Mother Solomon out of respect. Solomon promoted Wyandot culture throughout the village and demonstrated the Wyandot language in community gatherings and public presentations. She taught the non-indigenous children about the relationships between their ancestors and Wyandots by repeating stories her elders had told. The Hocking Sentinel, a local newspaper in Logan, Ohio, described her storytelling as full of interest and romance. A writer for the newspaper stated that they visited Solomon often and that she spoke for hours about early Wyandot history and her childhood. In 1881, Solomon briefly visited her relatives in Kansas who had sent many invitations. She gave away paintings of the Wyandot chiefs Mononque and Between the Logs in 1883 and allowed them to be reproduced. Mother Solomon advocated for the village to restore the rundown mission church as a means to preserve Wyandot presence in Ohio. In 1888, with a $2,000 budget, the General Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church began repairs. On September 21, 1889, the Central Ohio Conference held a rededication ceremony attended by an estimated 3,000 people. General William H. Gibson was among the ministers who gave speeches, and Elnathan C. Gavitt, the only former missionary in attendance, spoke fondly about his time there. Mother Solomon, now 72, was the only Wyandot removed in 1843 to attend. She sang a Wyandot translation of "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing," a hymn she had learned at the church. The Urbana Daily Citizen's J.W. Henley called her an object of great interest. The Western Christian Advocate agreed and described her as strong and well-preserved. Many attendees found beauty in her native language, and the Bryan College Station Eagle thought she sang in a sweet, clear voice. After her song, participants in the service passed hats around and raised $25 for her to buy winter clothes. As the participants circulated and shook hands, the Western Christian Advocate concluded, "Mother Solomon and many others became very happy and rejoiced and shouted the praises of God." Mother Solomon's death and legacy. After becoming weaker, Mother Solomon agreed to move into the home of the local mill owners Mr. and Mrs. Jacob Heyman in July 1890. That year, she signed a document objecting to the removal of remains in the Huron Indian Cemetery. She died on August 18, 1890, and her funeral was held at the Wyandot Mission Church 2 days later. Despite a downpour that morning, a large crowd gathered with people from across Wyandot County. Solomon's death was widely reported in local newspapers, which emphasized her father's role as chief, her removal to Kansas and return to Ohio, and her work as a nanny. LaBelle refers to the coverage as a momentary acknowledgement of Wyandot resilience in Ohio, but also notes that many stories falsely called Solomon the last of the Wyandots, which reflected the misconception and romanticization of Native Americans as a vanishing people. Mother Solomon was a popular local figure. According to the archivist Thelma R. Marsh, she was almost a legend when she died. Many adults attested to being raised by Solomon, and some deemed it an honor. LaBelle believes that her attainment of the honorific mother, rather than the lesser sister or auntie, indicates success in her work. She describes Solomon as part of a 19th century wave of Midwestern mothers who helped reconcile settler and indigenous cultures through community service and caregiving. Studies about Mother Solomon are limited, though an exception is Marsh's 1984 children's book, Daughter of Gray Eyes, The Story of Mother Solomon. It spans 60 pages and draws from archival material, journal articles, and family interviews. On the morning of August 12, 1990, Marsh led a service at the Mission Church commemorating the centennial of Solomon's funeral. In October 2016, the church held an event celebrating the bicentennial of missionaries in Ohio, and Solomon's life was recounted during a tour of the cemetery attended by 192 people. In February 1931, the Wyandotte County Museum displayed a century-old chair built by Solomon that featured a woven shagbark hickory seat and no nails. They dedicated a glass case to her in May 1971 with her glasses, smoking pipe, beaded purse, candle molds, woven basket, and portrait. In addition, the McCutcheon Overland Inn Museum displayed her saddle in the Anderson General Store in May 2021. Through trials of removal and loss, Margaret Gray Eyes Solomon embodied Wyandotte resilience, her story a testament to enduring spirit amid America's turbulent history.
Thank you for watching this AGNDD intelliReport, dear viewers. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell button to get notified during new uploads. And make sure to tune in next time. Stay safe and healthy. Cheers!